It was late and I was exhausted. The long road trip had taken its toll on me, and I had been driving for hours without a real break. The highway stretched on for what seemed like eternity, and the only company I had was the sound of my tires rolling over the asphalt. I was deep in the middle of nowhere with nothing around me but endless fields and the occasional farmstead. My GPS had long since stopped working, and I wasn't even sure which state I was in anymore. I needed a place to rest, to recharge, but there was nothing for miles until, in the distance, I saw a flickering neon sign. Motel, it read in large, almost grotesque letters. The sign buzzed, flickering on and off, casting an eerie glow across the roadside. A moment later, the sign blinked off entirely, but I wasn't about to drive any further. The fatigue weighed heavily on me, and I just needed to stop. I pulled off the highway and into the parking lot of the motel. The lot was nearly empty, save for a few rusted cars scattered across the cracked pavement. The place looked old, abandoned even, but I didn't care. I needed a bed and a roof over my head for the night. I parked my car near the front entrance and walked into the lobby. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale smoke and dust. The wooden counter had seen better days, and the fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently. Behind the desk sat an old man, probably in his late 70s, who barely lifted his head as I entered. His eyes were clouded with age, and his skin had the thin, papery look of someone who had been weathered by time. He didn't seem surprised to see me. In fact, he barely acknowledged my presence. "Room for the night?" I asked, hoping he would take the hint. The man's lips parted, revealing yellowed teeth. "Room 6, he croaked, barely audible. He handed me an old metal key on a faded keychain, and I could feel the cold weight of it as I took it. "It's down. The hall. It's the last one," he added cryptically. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thanked him and turned down the dark hallway that led to the rooms. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I walked, and the low hum of an old air conditioner rattled from somewhere in the distance. The hall was empty, no other guests, no sounds of movement. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, the edges curling up as if to escape the wear of time. I reached room 6, and I immediately felt a strange unease wash over me. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to make it seem like it hadn't been fully closed. It was odd, but I chalked it up to carelessness. I pushed the door open with a quick shove, and the cold air hit me like a slap to the face. The room was small, but it had the basic essentials: a bed, a dresser, a nightstand, and a small bathroom off to the side. The bedspread was thick with dust, and the wooden furniture seemed like it hadn't been touched in years. The wallpaper in here was in worse shape than in the hallway, ripped in places with faded patterns that looked as if they had been designed decades ago. But more than anything, it was the silence that struck me. There wasn't a sound in the room, not even the hum of the refrigerator or the rattle of the air conditioning. I shrugged it off. Tired, and already making the decision to just sleep through the night, I threw my bags on the bed. I walked into the bathroom to freshen up, and as I turned on the tap, the water sputtered before running clear. It was unsettling, but not entirely out of the ordinary. Old pipes, I assumed. As I washed my face, I noticed the mirror above the sink. It was cracked, splitting my reflection in two. The split was jagged, and as I leaned closer, I thought I saw something move in the reflection. Just out of the corner of my eye, I blinked, thinking it was just the shadows playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, the mirror was completely still, reflecting my face back at me with no anomalies. I finished up quickly, feeling a bit shaken for reasons I couldn't pinpoint, and walked back into the room. But as I entered, I immediately froze in my tracks. The bed, where I had placed my bags just moments ago, looked different. The blankets were arranged as if someone had just made the bed, but I hadn't touched them. I stepped back, my heart racing. I hadn't touched anything in the room besides my bags. The bed was exactly as it had been when I first walked in, untouched. I couldn't understand it. There was no way I could have missed making the bed, but the more I looked at it, the more I was convinced that someone else had been in the room. Panic began to settle in. My mind raced with possibilities. Could someone have been in here? Was there someone hiding in the room? Or perhaps someone had checked in earlier and left without a trace? I walked to the door, but before I could open it, I heard something that made my blood run cold, a soft knock. The sound was faint, coming from the door like someone was standing on the other side, waiting. My heart raced in my chest. I stood still, frozen, not sure what to do. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by the faintest sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. I waited a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, before I cautiously opened the door. No, one was there. The hallway was empty. I took a deep breath, convincing myself that I was imagining things, but then I noticed something else. The old man, the one who had given me the room key, was standing at the far end of the hallway. His back was to me, and he was staring at the floor. As I watched, he turned, slowly, and gave me the strangest smile I'd ever seen, without saying a word. He simply nodded as if acknowledging my presence in a way that felt far too intimate. Then, without another glance, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest as I quickly packed my bags and rushed out the door. I didn't even care to stop and check. Out. I ran to my car, hoping that somehow I could forget the images of the motel. As I sped away, I glanced back in the rearview mirror. The motel was still there, standing ominously in the dark. But then I noticed something strange. The lights, flickering, as they had when I first arrived, were now completely off. The place was completely dark, like it had disappeared from existence. And then, just as I turned a corner and lost sight of it, I saw the neon sign flicker on once more. Only this time, it wasn't just a regular flicker. It blinked on and off, rapidly, as though the motel was beckoning me back. I didn't stop, I didn't look back. It was just past midnight when I rolled into a small, sleepy town on my solo road trip. I had been driving for hours, and with no decent hotels in sight, I decided to stop at the first motel I could find. The place was barely noticeable from the road. A flickering neon sign that read vacancy, perched next to a barely visible dirt path leading to a rundown building. The motel looked ancient, with a rusted, half-broken sign dangling from the roof. But I didn't care. I needed sleep. I parked my car and walked into the lobby, which smelled faintly of mildew. Behind the counter was a middle-aged woman wearing an old sweater, her eyes half-lidded as if she had just woken from a deep slumber. She didn't even look up as I approached, but when I asked for a room, she handed me a key to room 12 without a word. I took the key and walked to my room, the floorboards creaking with each step. The hallway was dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights, and there was a strange stillness in the air. The heavy silence made the place feel like it had been abandoned for years, though I could sense it wasn't. Room 12 was at the far end of the hall, tucked away in a dark corner, and when I opened the door, the room felt cold. Despite the thick, threadbare blanket on the bed, the room had an icy chill, and a sense of unease washed over me. I tried to shake off the discomfort, thinking it was just my tiredness playing tricks on me. I placed my bags on the bed and decided to take a shower. The bathroom was small, with peeling wallpaper and a flickering light overhead. As I stood under the cold stream of water, I heard the faintest sound, whispering, almost like a hum. I froze, shutting off the water. The whispers seemed to grow louder, as though someone was standing right outside the bathroom, waiting. I stepped out of the shower and called out, thinking maybe it was just the pipes or the wind. But no answer came. I quickly dressed, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I walked back into the room. That's when I saw it, an old rocking chair by the window, one that hadn't been there when I entered. It began to rock gently back and forth, as if someone were sitting in it, but there was no one there. Panic set in. I rushed to the door to leave, but it wouldn't open. I tried the handle several times, but it felt stuck. My heart raced and I turned around, my eyes darting around the room. The whispers grew louder, and I noticed the temperature drop even further. The air felt thick, heavy, suffocating. As I stared at the chair, it began to move faster, rocking back and forth violently, the sound of the wood creaking loudly in the silence. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, hoping the flashlight would work, but the screen remained black. I heard the whispers again, clearer this time, low guttural voices calling my name. I stumbled back, my back pressed against the wall, as the door finally flung open on its own. I didn't hesitate. I ran out into the hall and down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman at the front desk was still sitting there, but now she was staring at me, her eyes wide with something that resembled fear. She didn't speak, but I could see that she knew exactly what had just happened. She simply handed me a new key to another room, but I didn't want to stay another minute. I left the motel, not daring to look back, but I swear I saw the old rocking chair in the window, still rocking by itself in the darkness. I never went back to that town, and I have never stopped wondering what kind of thing was waiting for me in that room. It was nearing midnight when my car broke down on a stretch of highway that seemed to have no end. I had been driving for hours, lost in thought, with no real destination in mind. The GPS had died hours ago, and now I was stranded. No gas stations in sight, no roadside lights to guide me. I decided to keep driving for as long as I could, hoping to find a place to rest. As luck would have it, after what felt like forever, I spotted a flickering neon sign in the distance. It was barely visible through the thick fog, but it said, "The last motel on Earth." At first I thought I had read it wrong, or maybe I was just hallucinating from exhaustion, but the sign didn't go away, and I saw the glowing lights in the distance grow brighter as I approached. I pulled into the gravel parking lot, my tires crunching underfoot as I parked in front of the main building. The motel had an eerie, outdated feel to it. Old peeling wood, a broken-down swing set in the corner, and a dim light coming from the front office. I stepped out of my car, hearing nothing but the crunch of gravel and the faint sound of wind in the trees. There was an unnatural stillness to the place that made my skin crawl. Inside the office, an elderly man sat behind the desk, wearing a faded green sweater and a pair of thick glasses. He looked up from an old book when I entered, his eyes narrowing slightly as he stared at me. Without saying a word, he handed me a key to room 8, saying, "You'll be safe here. There's nowhere else for miles." His voice was gravelly, and his eyes seemed to hold a strange, almost vacant look. I took the key, offering a polite thank you, and he nodded, not saying anything else. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but I needed rest, and this was the only place available. Room 8 was at the far end of the building, down a dark hallway, and as I walked, I noticed there were no other cars in the lot. No other lights were on in the other rooms. It was like the place was completely deserted. I opened the door to room 8, and the musty smell of old carpet and stale air hit me immediately. The room was small, with a single bed, a dresser, and a tiny bathroom. It felt as though no one had stayed here for years. I unpacked my things and decided to take a shower before bed. As the hot water ran over me, I could hear a faint sound, like a whisper, coming from the walls. I leaned closer, trying to understand the muffled words, but it was like they were just beyond my reach. Shaking it off as my imagination, I finished up and returned to the room. But when I opened the door, I froze. The room was not as I had left it. The bed was unmade, the sheets thrown to the floor, as if someone had been there while I was in the bathroom. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and called out, but there was no answer. I rushed to the door to leave, but it was locked from the inside. The key didn't work. Panic gripped me as I banged on the door, yelling for help, but there was no response. I turned toward the window and saw something that made my blood run cold. The parking lot was now empty, and in the distance I could see the faint outline of a figure standing in front of the office. The figure didn't move. It just stared at me. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my things and forced the window open, climbing out into the night. I ran across the lot to my car, not daring to look back at the motel. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The motel was dark again, its lights flickering out. The sign, once glowing brightly, was now completely dark. The man had been right about one thing: there was nowhere else for miles.